My son sold their home and handed over $615,000 for my daughter-in-law to use however she pleased. Then they showed up on my doorstep asking to stay under my roof. When I said no, my daughter-in-law struck me across the face. That same afternoon, I called my attorney. The day they received the summons was the day I finally felt some justice stirring. I want to share my story with you, follow it until the very end, and tell me in the comments which city you're watching from. I'd love to see how far my story travels. My name is Margaret, and at 64, I believed I knew my son inside and out. I thought I could trust the boy I sacrificed everything for, the man I raised with my own hands. But one Tuesday morning in October shattered everything I thought I understood about loyalty, family, and the child I had poured my soul into. I was in the backyard, pruning the last roses of the season, when I heard a car engine rolling into the driveway. The sound was familiar, Daniel's SUV, but the way the doors slammed told me this wasn't a normal visit. I felt the unease before I even saw their faces. When I came around to the front of my small two-story home, Daniel was standing stiffly on the porch with his wife, Clarissa. But this wasn't just a drop-by. Clarissa had 2 large suitcases at her feet, and Daniel was dragging more bags from the trunk. "Mom," Daniel called, his voice strained and weary. "We need to talk." I wiped my hands on my gardening apron, my eyes studying the two of them. Daniel looked worn out, hair messy, tie hanging loose, shadows under his eyes. Clarissa, on the other hand, looked untouched by the stress, dressed head to toe in a flawless designer outfit, her dark hair polished to perfection. "What's happening?" I asked cautiously, unlocking the front door. "Is something wrong?" They stepped inside, their footsteps echoing across the wooden floor. I noticed how Clarissa's gaze lingered over every detail of my living room, my furniture, my framed photos, the simple decorations I had cherished. Her eyes weren't admiring. They were calculating. Daniel dropped into my late husband's old recliner, a chair that still carried the weight of memory. Clarissa didn't sit, only smoothed her skirt and stood poised. My chest tightened with unease. I poured myself coffee from the pot I'd brewed earlier, forcing my hands to remain steady. "Go on," I said quietly. Daniel glanced at Clarissa. She gave him a barely there nod. "We sold the house," he said. The word struck me like a hammer. I set my cup down carefully on its saucer, the sound of porcelain tapping against porcelain breaking the silence. "Which house?" I asked, though I already knew. "Our house. The one on Willow Lane," Daniel admitted. My heart sank. The very house I had helped them buy. The one where I had put in $35,000 from my retirement savings as the down payment. The house I spent weekends painting, repairing, planting flowers in the garden Clarissa never once appreciated. "You sold it?" My voice trembled. "Why didn't you talk to me first?" Clarissa finally spoke, her voice cool and dismissive. "We didn't need permission, Margaret. It was our home." I swallowed back my frustration. "I know it was yours, but you both promised it was the place you'd raise your family. You told me it was your forever home." Daniel shifted uncomfortably. "Plans change, Mom. How much did you get for it?" I asked. $615,000, Clarissa answered quickly, her lips curling into something that almost looked like satisfaction. The number stung. $615,000, more money than I had ever seen at once in my entire life. "That's a lot," I said softly. "So, where are you moving? Somewhere bigger? Better schools?" The silence that followed felt like the air itself had turned heavy. Daniel looked down at his hands. Clarissa glanced at her nails, unfazed. "Actually," Daniel finally muttered, "we were hoping to stay here. Just for a while. Until things settle." I froze. "Here? With me?" "Just for a few months," he said quickly. "We won't cause trouble." I narrowed my eyes. "And what happened to the money from the sale?" The pause that followed was dangerous. Well, Clarissa said, brushing invisible lint from her skirt, I had expenses. My chest tightened. What kind of expenses? Personal ones, she said, her tone final. I wasn't ready to let it drop. Clarissa, you just sold a house for over $600,000. What could possibly? I bought jewelry, she interrupted sharply. Some clothes. Got my car upgraded. Took a trip with my sister to California. And I paid off my credit cards. I stared at her, numb. How much jewelry? I asked quietly. Does it matter? She snapped. It was my money to spend. Your money? The words slipped out. Daniel raised his head then, and I saw it, the shame and defeat in his eyes. Daniel, I said firmly, how much debt did she have? He sighed deeply. About $75,000. The air left my lungs. What on earth did she spend $75,000 on? Mostly clothes, shoes, vacations, he muttered. And then, the rest of the house money. My pulse raced. The rest? What happened? Daniel glanced at Clarissa, who was now scrolling on her phone like she was bored of the conversation. She wanted to invest in her friend's boutique, he admitted. My voice was cold. How much? $300,000, Clarissa said flatly, not even glancing up from her phone. It's going to be successful. The number hit me like a slap. $300,000 thrown into a boutique dream by someone who had never run anything in her life. So let me get this straight, I whispered. You sold your home for $615,000. Paid off $75,000 in debt. Put $300,000 into a boutique. And the rest? I told you, Clarissa said with irritation. Spa trips, furniture, gifts for my family. Things add up. My heart sank. More than $500,000 gone in mere months. Gone. And now they wanted to live with me. No, I said quietly. Daniel's head snapped up. Mom. I said no. The room chilled. My son's face fell, but Clarissa's mask slipped for just a second, revealing something sharp and venomous underneath. You can't be serious, Daniel pleaded. We're family. Yes, I replied, my voice steady. And that's exactly why I won't let you destroy everything I've worked for. Clarissa slammed her phone down on the table. Don't you dare judge us, Margaret. My husband made a business decision. Not every investment turns a profit right away. Business decision? I said, my voice laced with disbelief. Spending $600,000 on jewelry, spas, and boutiques isn't business, it's ruin. Her composure cracked. How dare you judge me, she hissed. It wasn't your money, I said coldly. That was the equity from a house Daniel worked for, one I helped him purchase. Daniel shot up from the recliner and began pacing near the front window. Mom, we wouldn't be asking if we had any other choice. What about Clarissa's family? I pressed. Surely her parents, her sister, someone. Daniel rubbed the back of his neck, shame darkening his face. Her parents live in a cramped one-bedroom condo, and her sister doesn't have the space. The very sister whose house Clarissa had poured thousands into redecorating as a surprise. Clarissa's eyes flared with indignation. My family is none of your concern, she snapped. They became my concern the moment you showed up here asking me to pick up the pieces of your reckless spending, I said, rising from my chair. My patience had been stretched to the breaking point. You burned through my son's future on luxuries, and now you expect me to bail you out. It wasn't frivolous. Clarissa shot back, springing to her feet. Her voice was shrill, edged with desperation. You wouldn't understand, you've lived in this tiny house your whole life, wearing the same worn clothes, driving that old clunker. You don't know what it's like to have standards. The insult cut, but I refused to flinch. No, Clarissa, I don't know what it's like to waste other people's money on designer bags and spa trips and then demand free housing when it all runs out. Daniel turned from the window, his face flushed. Mom, please. I know Clarissa made some mistakes. Some mistakes? I interrupted sharply. Daniel, she squandered over $600,000 in a matter of months. That's not a mistake. That's a pattern. You don't know anything about our marriage, Clarissa hissed, her lip curling. You don't know what it's like living with someone who pinches pennies, who refuses to spend on anything nice. I know what it's like to live responsibly, I answered, my voice steady. To save for what I want instead of bleeding others dry. Her face twisted with rage. Oh, look at you, perfect Margaret. The perfect mother who thinks she raised the perfect son but can't handle that he married me. I never said that, I replied evenly. You didn't have to. It's written all over your face every time you look at me. The bitter truth was, she wasn't entirely wrong. I had disliked Clarissa from the day Daniel brought her home 3 years ago, not because of her looks or her background, but because of moments like this, where her mask slipped and revealed the entitled, manipulative woman she really was. Clarissa, I said carefully, I don't dislike you for who you are. I dislike the choices you make and how they're dragging my son down. My husband is a grown man, she shot back. He makes his own decisions. Really? I countered. Because from where I stand, it looks like you call the shots and he just follows along. Daniel bristled. Mom, that's not fair. Isn't it? Then tell me, Daniel, whose idea was it to sell the house? He hesitated. It was, we discussed it together. And whose idea was the $300,000 boutique gamble? Another hesitation. Clarissa believed it was a good opportunity. And the $75,000 in credit card debt you didn't even know existed before marriage? Daniel's face drained of color. Mom. Answer the question, Daniel. Who's been steering the finances in this marriage? We make them together, he muttered weakly. Clarissa's laugh rang through the room like broken glass. Oh, stop pretending. Tell her the truth. Tell her how you begged me to marry you, how lucky you knew you were that someone like me even gave you the time of day. My blood chilled. Someone like you? Yes, Clarissa said, her voice dripping poison. Someone beautiful, sophisticated, who could have had anyone she wanted. Your son knows he hit the jackpot marrying me. I looked at Daniel, praying for him to speak up, to defend himself. But he kept his eyes on the floor, shoulders slumped, beaten down by years of her control. And now, Clarissa continued, her words sharpening like knives, when we need help, his own mother slams the door in his face. What kind of mother does that? The kind who refuses to let her son be destroyed by a manipulative woman, I said, my voice rising despite my restraint. That's when she went too far. You bitter old hag, Clarissa screamed. You're just jealous. Jealous that he loves me more than he's ever loved his pathetic, lonely mother. Clarissa, stop. Daniel barked, but his voice wavered with no conviction. No, she needs to hear this. You're a miserable old woman rotting in a shabby house, bitter at everyone with more than you. Face it, Margaret, your son doesn't need you anymore. He has me. Something in me broke. Decades of biting my tongue, of keeping peace, of watching her erode my bond with Daniel, it all snapped. Get out, I said, my voice like ice. What? I said, get out of my house. Clarissa laughed cruelly. You can't throw us out. We've got nowhere to go. That's not my problem, I replied firmly. Mom, please, Daniel begged. Reconsider. Just for a few days. You should have thought of that before letting your wife waste your future on jewelry and spa treatments. Clarissa stormed closer, fury blazing in her eyes. You don't get to talk to me like that in front of my husband. This is my house, I snapped back. And in my house, I'll say whatever I want. Now get out. We're not leaving, Clarissa said, folding her arms defiantly. Daniel, tell your mother we're staying. I looked at my son, hoping to see even a flicker of the man I had raised. Instead, I saw a broken shell, unable to fight back. Daniel, I said softly, ask your wife to leave my home. His face twisted with anguish. Mom, please, just let us stay for a little while. No. Clarissa's mask shattered. Fine, she screamed. If you want to be a selfish, heartless witch, then we'll make sure everyone knows what kind of mother you really are. She stormed toward the front door and wrenched it open, so violently it slammed against the wall. Outside, my neighbors, Mrs. Harris from across the street and the Williamses next door, looked up from their yards, startled by the commotion. You want to know what kind of woman Margaret Walsh really is? Clarissa shouted, her voice slicing through the quiet street. She's throwing her own son out. Her flesh and blood. My cheeks burned as neighbors froze, eyes locked on my porch. Clarissa, stop. Daniel pleaded, finally trying to intervene. No! Let them hear it, she cried, her voice cracking into fake sobs. This woman raised a son who worked his whole life for a home, and when he needed help, she turned him away. Heartless! Mrs. Harris crept closer, listening with wide eyes. The Williamses stood frozen. Even the mailman paused in his truck, watching. That's enough, I said, stepping onto the porch. No, it's not. Clarissa whirled to face me, her eyes burning. You act so high and mighty, but you're nothing more than a selfish old woman jealous of people who live better than you. Clarissa, that's enough. I demanded. Why? Because you're embarrassed? Good, you should be. And then it happened. Her hand shot out, striking me across the face. The crack echoed through the street like a whip. I staggered back, hand clutching my cheek, not from pain, but from shock. The neighbors gasped. Mrs. Harris covered her mouth. The Williams boy cut his lawnmower mid-run and stood frozen. I turned to Daniel, my son, praying for him to show outrage, to defend me. But he stood paralyzed, caught between us, eyes hollow. Did you just hit me? I asked, my voice low and steady. Clarissa lifted her chin, defiant. You deserved it, for throwing your own family out like garbage. The world seemed to still. My neighbors stared. Even the postman leaned from his truck to watch. Daniel, I whispered, my heart breaking, your wife just assaulted me in front of everyone. And you're going to let her? He opened his mouth, closed it, and stammered, she's upset. She didn't mean to slap me across the face? I asked coldly. Clarissa stepped between us, her voice sharp. Don't twist this into you being a victim. You brought it on yourself. I stared at her, at the woman who had just humiliated me in front of my neighbors, ruined my son's future, and now dared to claim I was the villain. Get off my property, I said firmly. Make me, she sneered. I looked at Daniel one last time, hoping, begging, for him to stand up for what was right. But his silence told me everything. You have 5 minutes to grab your bags and leave, I said. If you're still here, I'm calling the police. You wouldn't dare, Clarissa hissed, but I saw uncertainty flicker in her eyes. I pulled my phone from my pocket and dialed 911. As the dial tone hummed in my ear, I watched Clarissa's face shift from bold to terrified. She clutched Daniel's arm. Tell your mother to put that phone down. Now, she hissed. But I was already speaking to the dispatcher, giving my address and explaining that I needed officers to remove trespassers who had just turned violent on my property. When I ended the call, Clarissa stared at me like I'd done the unthinkable. You actually called the police on your own son? No, I answered evenly. I called the police on the woman who just hit me in front of witnesses. For the first time since I'd known her, real fear flickered in Clarissa Walsh's eyes. The squad car pulled up within 10 minutes, though it felt like an hour. Officer Patel, a calm woman in her early 30s, introduced herself with a professional warmth that steadied me. Her partner, Officer Green, older with gray at his temples, wore the weary expression of someone who had seen too many family meltdowns. By the time they reached the porch, Clarissa had smoothed her hair and wiped her tears, but panic still pooled behind her lashes. Daniel stood beside their luggage, looking like a boy who'd lost the map home. "Ma'am," Officer Patel said to me, "we received a report of an assault." "Yes," I said, touching my burning cheek. "She slapped me." Officer Green turned to Clarissa. "Is that accurate, ma'am?" She was being unreasonable, Clarissa shot back, as if that excused it. "We just needed a place to stay for a short time, and she kicked us out like strangers." "That doesn't give you the right to lay hands on anyone," Officer Patel said, firm but even. She looked back to me. "Do you wish to press charges?" I glanced at my son, head down, silent, offering me nothing. This was the child I had worked for, prayed over, defended. And he couldn't find the courage to defend me. "Yes," I said quietly. "I want to press charges." Clarissa blanched. "You can't be serious." "Assault is serious," Officer Green replied. "And there are multiple witnesses." Across the street, Mrs. Harris stood at her gate. Next door, the Williams family had drifted onto their lawn. When Officer Patel looked over, Mrs. Harris nodded sharply. "I saw it." She struck Margaret across the face. "Unprovoked." "This is absurd," Clarissa protested. "She's my mother-in-law. It's a family matter." "Family or not," Officer Patel said, "assault is still a crime. You'll need to come with us." As they guided Clarissa toward the patrol car, she twisted back to Daniel. "Don't just stand there. Fix this." Daniel stayed rooted, watching his wife being placed in the back of the cruiser. He looked at me then, a flicker of accusation in his eyes. "Mom, did you really have to do this?" "I did," I said before he could finish. "Your wife hit me in front of the entire neighborhood, and you did nothing. She's your wife and I'm your mother, but apparently that doesn't matter to you anymore." Officer Green approached with a clipboard. "Mrs. Walsh, we'll need a formal statement at the station. Can you come in this afternoon?" "Of course." When the car pulled away, Clarissa behind the glass, Daniel hefted his suitcases back into the SUV like a man moving underwater. "Where will you go?" I asked, despite everything. He shrugged. "A hotel tonight, maybe." "With what money?" The question hung there, obvious and cruel because it was true. He couldn't keep that up for long. This was only the beginning. "Daniel," I said softly, "this doesn't have to be the end. If you walk away from this, if you admit this is wrong, we can rebuild. You and I." He met my gaze, eyes dull with exhaustion. "She's my wife, Mom. I can't abandon her." "She abandoned you when she spent your future on handbags and spa weekends." "It's not that simple." "It's exactly that simple." He got into the SUV without another word and drove off, leaving me standing on my porch with an emptiness I hadn't felt since the day my husband died. The rest of the day blurred. At the station, I gave my statement, what happened on the porch, the slap, the witnesses. Detective Alvarez, who took my report, was meticulous and kind. "Mrs. Walsh," she asked when we finished, "has your daughter-in-law ever been physically aggressive with you before?" "Not physically," I said after a beat. "But emotionally?" "For years." "Can you elaborate?" I told her how Clarissa had slowly isolated Daniel, how visits were always scheduled when she knew I couldn't come, how holidays were too stressful, how she painted me as critical and meddling until my son started believing it. Then the finances, the house sale, the avalanche of spending. You said they sold for over 600,000? 615, I said. Gone in months. The detective let out a low breath. That's a lot to burn through. She has expensive tastes and no sense of limits, I said. And my son goes along with it. He can't see what it's doing to his future, or to this family. That evening, alone at my kitchen table with a cup of tea, I tried to think beyond the adrenaline. Pressing charges was only step one. They would come back. If not banging on the door, then through some calmer performance. I knew this pattern. I needed a plan. My thoughts wandered to the house on Willow Lane, the one I'd helped them buy, the one I'd poured $35,000 of my retirement into. Money I had spent decades earning. Money that had evaporated with everything else. Then I remembered the paperwork. There had been mountains of it when they closed. And because my contribution was significant, the real estate attorney had insisted on protections. I went to the file cabinet and pulled a folder labeled Daniel, House Purchase. Inside were copies of everything, including something I had nearly forgotten, a promissory note. At the time, the attorney had been adamant. Mrs. Walsh, he'd said, this should be a loan, not a gift. It protects you, and it ensures your son understands the responsibility he's taking on. I hadn't wanted a loan, I wanted to help my child. But Daniel himself had insisted. Mom, I'll pay you back. Let's keep it official. The note was explicit, $35,000 at 5% annual interest, payments to begin 1 year after closing. It was secured against the property, my interest recorded. They had sold the house without repaying me. Without even mentioning the outstanding debt. I picked up my phone and dialed Harold Benton, the attorney who handled the original purchase. His assistant found me a morning appointment. That night, I barely slept. I kept seeing Daniel at 8 years old, clambering into my bed during thunderstorms. Daniel beaming in his cap and gown. Daniel sobbing at his father's funeral, promising he would always look after me. Where had that boy gone? How had he become a man who stood silent while his wife struck his mother? The next morning I dressed in my best suit and drove to Benton and Ames. Harold greeted me with a firm handshake and a concerned smile. Mrs. Walsh, I'm sorry you're going through this. Tell me everything. I laid it out, the sale, the spending, the assault, the arrest. He took notes, asked precise questions, listened like the room had nowhere else to be. When I finished, he leaned back. Margaret, you have meaningful legal leverage. What do you mean? The promissory note securing your $35,000 was recorded as a lien. When your son sold without satisfying the debt, he breached the terms. You have a strong claim for breach of contract and potentially conversion for disposing of collateralized property without consent. A small, fierce flutter rose in my chest, not joy, but something close to resolve. What does that look like, practically? It means we can sue for the principal, the accrued interest, and damages. Because the debt was tied to real property, we may also be able to attach other assets to satisfy a judgment. What assets are left? He gave a thin, grim smile. We'll find out. For the next hour, he walked me through options, a civil suit for repayment plus interest and damages, possible criminal referral for theft by conversion, given the secured interest, the likelihood of settlement, the timelines. Harold, I said quietly, I'm not trying to destroy my son. I just need him to understand that what he's doing has consequences. Sometimes, he said gently, the kindest thing you can do for someone you love is stop shielding them from the consequences. I carried that sentence with me all the way home. Had I been protecting Daniel or enabling him? Had my cushion become his permission to keep sinking? By the time I pulled into my driveway, my decision was made. I called Harold and told him to file. Not just against Clarissa, but against both of them. They sold the house together, they could face the fallout together. Then I made another call. A locksmith arrived within the hour, and every lock in my house was changed. I wasn't taking any more chances. The very next day I had a security system installed, cameras positioned to capture every angle of my property. No more surprises, no more ambushes. That afternoon, my phone rang. Daniel. Mom, he said, his voice tight. Clarissa made bail. We need to talk. No, I said flatly. We don't. Please. She regrets what happened. She was upset, she didn't mean. Daniel, I cut him off, my voice like steel. Your wife took $35,000 from me, then struck me across the face when I refused to house you both after you blew through over $500,000. There is nothing to talk about. What do you mean, she stole from you? So I told him. About the promissory note. About the lien against the house. About the lawsuit I'd filed that morning. Silence. Long, thick silence, until I thought he might have hung up. Mom, he whispered finally, his voice trembling. You can't sue us. We're family. You're right, Daniel, I said softly. We are family. Which is why your betrayal cut deeper than if a stranger had robbed me. We didn't steal from you. You sold a house with a $35,000 lien on it, without repaying the loan. What else would you call it? Another silence. How much are you suing for? $35,000 plus 3 years interest, plus legal fees, plus damages for conversion and breach of contract. My attorney estimates around $60,000 in total. We don't have $60,000, he said, panic creeping into his voice. You should have thought of that before letting your wife burn through your future on handbags and spa weekends. Mom, please. Maybe we could work something out, pay you slowly, over time? You mean like the original promissory note? The one you ignored for 3 years before you sold the house? On the other end, I heard his heavy breathing, the sound of someone cornered. Where are you staying? I asked. A roadside motel. Cheapest we could find. How long can you afford that? Maybe a week. 2, if we stretch it. And after that? I don't know, Mom. I really don't know. For a fleeting second, my heart softened. He sounded so small, so lost. But then I remembered Clarissa's hand striking my face, and my resolve hardened. Daniel, I said gently, I love you. I always will. But I will not allow myself to be manipulated, stolen from, or attacked. If you want a relationship with me, you must take responsibility for your choices, and their consequences. What does that mean? It means you need to decide what matters more, your marriage to Clarissa or your relationship with your mother. Right now, you cannot have both. I hung up before he could answer. My hands shook as I set the phone down. Outside, the world seemed unchanged, the glow of the setting sun on quiet lawns, Mrs. Harris watering her roses, the Williams boy circling his driveway on a bicycle. It all looked ordinary. But I knew my life, my family, would never feel ordinary again. Tomorrow, the legal papers would be in their hands. Tomorrow, Daniel and Clarissa would learn that actions have weight. 3 days after filing, Harold Benton, my attorney, called. Margaret, he said, I need you to sit down. My investigator has uncovered information you need to hear. I was already seated at the kitchen table, but my grip on the phone tightened. What kind of information? Clarissa has a history of this behavior. Before she married your son, she was engaged twice. Both men ended things after discovering she had been using their credit cards without permission. In one case, she ran up over $50,000 in debt before being caught. My stomach sank. Does Daniel know? I don't believe so. She's adept at covering her tracks. But there's more. The boutique she supposedly invested in? It doesn't exist. No license, no storefront, no business filings. Nothing. I felt sick. So the money is simply gone. It appears that way. And Margaret, there's something worse. She's been having an affair for at least 6 months, maybe longer. The man is wealthy, married, and she's been using Daniel's money to fund their relationship. The jewelry, the spa trips, the car detailing, it was all part of maintaining that affair. The room spun. I clutched the edge of the table to keep from sliding to the floor. My decent, hardworking son had been gutted by a woman who treated him like an ATM while giving herself to another man. Does Daniel know? I asked, my voice trembling. No. But the affair has ended. The man's wife found out and gave him an ultimatum. That's why Clarissa suddenly pushed to sell the house. Why she blew through the money. Why she came begging for shelter. Her lifeline was cut off. I closed my eyes. Of course. It all made sense, the sudden urgency, the recklessness, the desperation. Clarissa wasn't just irresponsible. She was predatory. What do we do with this? I asked. We use it. In your lawsuit, we can argue fraud and deception. And your son deserves to know exactly who he married. That same afternoon, the process server delivered the papers to the motel. 30 minutes later, my phone rang again. Mom! Daniel's voice shook with fury. What is this? A lawsuit? Yes, I said calmly. I told you it was coming. 67,000? You're suing us for 67,000? That's what you owe me, plus interest, plus fees, plus damages. We don't have that kind of money. I know. That's what happens when you rob your own family to live a life you can't afford. In the background, Clarissa's voice shrieked, unintelligible but venomous. Daniel came back on. She says you've lost your mind. Tell your wife I am perfectly sane. And I'm finished being robbed and assaulted. Mom, please. Can't we work something out? No, Daniel. That time passed long ago, 3 years ago, when you ignored the first payment on the note. 6 months ago, when you sold the house without repaying me. Last week, when you turned up on my doorstep broke and demanding shelter. You had your chances. What do you expect us to do? We're living in a motel. I expect you to get jobs. To stand on your own 2 feet. She can't work. Clarissa's never had a job. Then it's time she learns. She's not built for minimum wage labor, she's what? Too important to contribute? Too good to earn her keep? Silence. Then Daniel's voice, low. She says she'll countersue for emotional distress. I almost laughed. Let her try. I have witnesses who saw her strike me. I have documentation of the loan. What does she have? More muffled shrieking in the background. Then Daniel returned. She wants to know why you're doing this to us. Because both of you need to learn that choices have consequences. And Daniel, there's something else you need to hear about your wife. What? I hesitated, knowing this moment could break him. She's been unfaithful to you. 4 months. The silence was crushing. I could hear nothing but my own heartbeat. What did you just say? Clarissa has been having an affair with a wealthy married man. She used your money to fund it. That's a lie. It's the truth. My attorney's investigator has proof. You hired someone to spy on my wife? I hired someone to trace the missing 600,000. The affair was uncovered along the way. In the background, I heard Clarissa's shrieks. What is she saying? What lies is she feeding you? She says you're lying, Daniel said, his voice hollow. Ask her about Richard Hawthorne, I said. The noise stopped instantly. Who is Richard Hawthorne? Daniel asked. Ask your wife. There was muffled chaos. Then Daniel returned. She claims she doesn't know anyone by that name. He's 52, owns a construction company, drives a black Mercedes. He's been buying her jewelry and funding her spa trips. His wife found out last week and forced him to end it. Silence stretched on and on. Daniel? Are you still there? How do you know all this? Because I hired professionals. And the truth is, your wife has been destroying your life to finance her affair with a married man who has now discarded her. She says it isn't true. Of course she does. That's what manipulators do. But think, Daniel. Think about who convinced you to sell your home, who burned through $600,000 while you worked, who humiliated you by striking your mother in public. And now think about who you're defending. I heard him inhale sharply. I need to think. Then think, I said. But think hard. Before I could say more, the line went dead. I sat at my kitchen table, staring at the silent phone, wondering if I'd just saved my son, or lost him for good. The next morning, Harold called again. Margaret, your son phoned my office. He wants to meet. Meet? About what? He didn't say. But he sounded different. Shaken. Maybe even awake. We scheduled the meeting for that afternoon. I arrived early, nerves coiled tight. When Daniel walked into Harold's office, I barely recognized him. He'd always been lean, but now he looked hollowed out, clothes hanging loose, dark circles bruising his eyes. He looked like a man who'd been living with a storm. Hello, Mom, Daniel said softly as he slipped into the chair across from me. Hello, Daniel. Harold Benton sat behind his polished desk, legal pad ready. Daniel, you said you wanted to discuss the lawsuit. I want the truth, Daniel said, his jaw tight. I want to see everything my wife has done. All of it. For the next hour, Harold laid it bare. The affair with Richard Hawthorne, backed by hotel invoices and credit card statements. The so-called boutique that was nothing more than a funnel to a friend, without even a license to its name. The years of hidden credit card debt. The same cycle with past boyfriends. With each revelation, my son's shoulders sank lower, until by the end he sat staring at his hands, silent tears streaking down his face. Where is she now? I asked quietly. At the motel. She doesn't know I came here. What will you do? Daniel lifted his red-rimmed eyes, voice breaking. I don't know, Mom. Everything, my marriage, my life, it's all been built on lies. She's been stealing from me for years. Not just money, my trust, my dignity. And when you tried to warn me, I turned my back on you. You were manipulated by someone very skilled at manipulation, I said gently. Don't blame yourself. I'm 35 years old, Mom, he whispered. I should have seen it. The excuses, the money that never added up, her eagerness to sell the house. I was blind. Harold cleared his throat. Daniel, the immediate question is how you want to proceed with the lawsuit. Your mother is entitled to the repayment. We could possibly arrange. No, Daniel cut him off. She deserves to be repaid in full. Every dollar. Son, I said softly, you just told me you don't have the money. I'll find it. I'll take extra shifts, sell whatever I can, take out a loan. Mom, you protected me my whole life, and I let Clarissa rob you and humiliate you. I won't fight this lawsuit. You'll get every cent. My eyes blurred with tears. And Mom, he added, his voice firming, I'm filing for divorce today. I can't stay married to someone who's lied to me about everything. The relief that swept over me was almost unbearable. And Clarissa? Daniel's face hardened. She made her choices. Let her live with them. When we left Harold's office, Daniel and I walked to our cars together. At my car, he paused. Mom, I don't deserve your forgiveness. I know I hurt you in ways I may never fix. But I promise, I'll spend the rest of my life trying. I cupped his cheek, like I had when he was small. You're already making it right, sweetheart. Driving home, for the first time in years, I felt hope. Not just that I'd recover my money, but that maybe, just maybe, I'd recovered my son. Still, I knew Clarissa wouldn't fade quietly. A woman who thrived on control and manipulation wouldn't surrender. And I was right. 3 days after Daniel filed for divorce, she came pounding on my door at 6 a.m. I peered through the peephole. Clarissa stood there in wrinkled clothes, her hair wild, mascara streaked across her cheeks. Margaret, she screamed, her voice shrill enough to wake the neighborhood. I know you're in there. Open this door right now. I stayed still. My cameras recorded every second. You ruined my marriage, she howled. You turned Daniel against me with your lies. Across the street, Mrs. Harris's porch light flicked on. The Williamses' dog began barking. I picked up my phone, prepared to call the police again. I'm not leaving, she shrieked. You owe me that much. I pressed the intercom button. Clarissa, leave my property now, or I'll call the police. Good. Call them, she taunted. Let them hear how you destroyed me. You have 30 seconds, I warned. No! Not until you admit what you've done. I dialed 911. This is Margaret Walsh on Willow Lane. The woman who assaulted me last week is back, refusing to leave and disturbing the peace. The dispatcher promised officers were on their way. Outside, Clarissa's fists pounded harder. You can't hide behind the police forever. Everyone needs to know who you really are. Then she began screaming our family business to the whole block. This woman turned her son against his wife. She hired investigators to spy on us. She's trying to steal our money. Neighbors emerged, some filming with their phones. Exactly what Clarissa wanted, to twist the story, to paint me as the villain. She's jealous because her son loves me more than her, she wailed. That's why she's destroying us. Just then, patrol cars pulled up. Officer Patel stepped out with a second officer I didn't recognize, his badge reading Sullivan. Ma'am, Patel said firmly, step away from the door. I'm not doing anything wrong. I just want to talk to my mother-in-law. Mrs. Walsh has asked you to leave. You need to comply, Officer Sullivan said flatly. She's destroying my family. She's telling lies about me, saying I'm having an affair. Patel consulted her notes. Are you Clarissa Walsh? The same woman arrested here last week for assault? It wasn't assault. It was barely a tap. You struck her in the face in front of witnesses. That is assault, Patel replied. I watched as Clarissa collapsed theatrically to her knees. Please, she sobbed, loud enough for everyone. Please, Margaret. I have nowhere to go. Daniel kicked me out, he's divorcing me, I don't have a cent left. For a split second, sympathy threatened me. But then I remembered, the $600,000 gone, the affair with Richard Hawthorne, the sham boutique. My resolve hardened. Officer Sullivan helped her up. Ma'am, you need to leave. If you come back, you'll be arrested for trespassing. But where am I supposed to go? She wailed. That isn't Mrs. Walsh's problem, Patel said firmly. You have 5 minutes to leave. As the police escorted her off, I called Daniel. He answered instantly. Mom, I heard. I'm sorry. I told her to stay away from you. Where is she staying? I don't know. After I filed, I told her she had to leave the motel. I can't pay for both of us. Maybe with that so-called boutique friend. Honestly, Mom, I don't care anymore. I'm finished cleaning up her messes. I felt a swell of pride. This was the son I raised, the man who took responsibility, who no longer excused bad behavior. How are you holding up? I asked. I'm at a weekly motel across town. It's not much, but it's clean. I'm working overtime, saving every penny. I need to pay you back. Daniel, you don't. Yes, I do. You were stolen from and hurt because of me. I need to make it right. That afternoon, Harold called. Margaret, we have a complication. Clarissa has retained an attorney. I thought she was broke. She is. But she found someone willing to work on contingency. They're claiming your lawsuit is harassment, that you're using the courts to interfere in her marriage. My blood boiled. That's absurd. I agree. But we need to be ready. They'll argue the promissory note was invalid, that it was a family gift. We'll need every record, missed payments, your attempts to collect, everything. For the next week, I compiled it all: phone logs of unanswered calls, emails with excuses, receipts for loans that had never been repaid. The pattern was undeniable. I hadn't been a bitter mother-in-law trying to ruin a marriage. I had been a mother, systematically lied to and drained. But Clarissa wasn't done. 2 days before the court date, she showed up somewhere she never should have: my workplace. I worked part-time as a bookkeeper at a small accounting office, something I'd taken up after retirement to keep busy and stretch my social security. I was finishing month-end reports when the receptionist buzzed me. She says she's your daughter-in-law, Jenny whispered. Should I send her back? My stomach dropped. No. Tell her I'm busy and don't take visitors during work hours. 5 minutes later, Jenny called again, nervous. She won't leave. She says she'll sit here all day if she has to. The clients are getting uncomfortable. I sighed, bracing myself, and walked to the lobby. Clarissa sat there, draped in one of her most expensive suits, hair perfectly styled, makeup immaculate. She looked like she was headed to a boardroom, not to ambush me. Clarissa, leave, I said firmly. This is my workplace. I just want to talk, she said loudly, making sure the whole office could hear. 5 minutes, that's all I'm asking. I could feel the eyes of my coworkers peeking from their desks, drawn to the scene. We have nothing to discuss. Please, Margaret, she said, her voice dripping with false sincerity. I know I made mistakes. I know I hurt you and Daniel. But I'm trying to make things right. For one fleeting second, her tone was so convincing that I almost believed her. But then I remembered the lies, the cheating, the slap across my face, the $600,000 gone like smoke. What do you want, Clarissa? I want to settle the lawsuit. I want to make peace between us. Fine, I said coldly. Pay me the $67,000 you owe and I'll drop it. Her painted smile faltered. You know I don't have that kind of money. Then we're done here. She stood, stepping closer, her perfume sharp in the air. Please. I made mistakes, but I don't deserve to have my life destroyed. You destroyed your own life when you stole from family and betrayed your husband. For a brief second, her mask slipped. I saw the real Clarissa, cold, calculating, dangerous. Fine, she whispered, her voice like a blade. If that's how you want to play, then that's how we'll play. But don't fool yourself. I know things about your precious son that would shock you. My stomach tightened. What kind of things? She smirked, a cruel curve of her lips. Let's just say Daniel hasn't been completely honest with you. Before I could press further, she turned and strode out, leaving me with a chill in my bones. That night, I called Daniel. She came to my office today. She said there are things about you I don't know. What does she mean? Silence stretched on the line. Daniel? Finally, he exhaled. Mom, there are things I never told you. Things I'm ashamed of. My heart sank. What kind of things? When Clarissa and I first married, I did some things. Financial things that weren't exactly legal. What do you mean? I falsified documents to get a better loan rate on our car. I didn't report some cash income one year. And when we applied for the mortgage on Willow Lane, I inflated my income. My stomach twisted. Daniel, why didn't you tell me this? Because I was ashamed. And because Clarissa told me it was normal. She said everyone does it. She kept copies of everything. Said it was for our records, but now I know she was stockpiling evidence. Insurance, in case I ever left her. I closed my eyes, finally seeing the full picture. Clarissa wasn't just a manipulator. She had deliberately entangled my son in wrongdoing so she could control him. Daniel, you need to tell Harold. Now. Mom, if this comes out, I could lose everything. My job, my license. I could go to prison. And if you don't tell him, she'll use it against you in court anyway. At least this way, we can control how it surfaces. The next morning, Daniel and I sat in Harold's office. My son confessed everything. Harold listened, calm and measured, jotting notes, asking precise questions. When Daniel finished, Harold leaned back. This is serious, he said, but not insurmountable. The statute of limitations has run out on some of these issues. Others can be resolved with voluntary disclosure and financial penalties. What about the lawsuit? I asked. It complicates things, Harold admitted. But Margaret, you need to understand, Clarissa isn't fighting about money anymore. She's fighting for control. She wants to destroy your son for leaving her. As we walked out of his office, I realized he was right. Clarissa wasn't just greedy. She was vindictive. And she was willing to scorch the earth to maintain her power. But I wasn't the same woman who had once opened my door to her. I was stronger now, and I would fight. The courtroom was smaller than I expected. Wooden benches, buzzing fluorescent lights that made everyone look pale. I sat at Harold's table, hands folded, heart steady. Daniel sat beside me, nervous but resolved. Over the past week, he had voluntarily disclosed his financial missteps to the authorities. It meant penalties, maybe even losing his job, but it stripped Clarissa of her blackmail. All rise, the bailiff called as Judge Patricia Harris entered. She was a woman in her 60s with silver hair and a stern expression that suggested she'd heard every sob story in the book. Clarissa entered with her attorney, a sharply dressed woman named Sarah Chin. Clarissa looked immaculate, fresh hair, flawless makeup, a navy dress that screamed respectable. She was playing her role, the innocent victim of a cruel mother-in-law. Ms. Chin went first. Her voice dripped with sympathy. She painted Clarissa as a young woman victimized by an unforgiving mother-in-law, harassed, spied on, dragged through court out of spite. Your Honor, Chin said smoothly, my client admits she made some financial mistakes, as many young people do. But Mrs. Walsh's response has been disproportionate and vindictive. She hired investigators, pressured her son into divorce, and is now using the courts to ruin a woman who has no means to defend herself. It was a convincing performance, if you didn't know the truth. Then Harold rose. Calm, deliberate, he laid the facts like bricks. The $35,000 loan documented in a legally binding note. 3 years of missed payments. The sale of the house without satisfying the lien. The assault witnessed by neighbors. This is not a tale of a bitter mother-in-law, he said firmly. This is a case of a woman systematically defrauded by someone who viewed her as an easy mark. Then Harold did something that made Clarissa's mask crack. He called Richard Hawthorne to the stand. A middle-aged man in an expensive suit walked in, jaw tight, eyes grim. Under oath, he confirmed the affair. He admitted he'd paid for jewelry, vacations, dinners, believing Clarissa was a wealthy divorcee in need. She told me her husband was abusive, Richard said flatly, and that his mother was trying to steal her inheritance. She said she needed money to fight them in court. Clarissa's face turned ghostly white. Her attorney scribbled notes furiously, clearly blindsided. And were you aware she was funding this relationship with money from the sale of her marital home? Harold asked. No. If I had known, I never would have agreed. I ended it last month. My wife discovered the affair and gave me an ultimatum. Chin tried to minimize the damage, insisting the affair was irrelevant. But Judge Harris's expression darkened. Finally, the judge turned to Clarissa directly. Ms. Walsh, do you dispute signing a promissory note agreeing to repay $35,000? Clarissa's lip trembled. No, Your Honor. Do you dispute that you failed to make any payments in 3 years? The circumstances. Do you dispute selling the house without satisfying the debt secured against it? Her attorney tried to interject. Your Honor, my client. Sit down, counselor, Judge Harris snapped. I'm asking your client. Clarissa's eyes brimmed with tears. I didn't realize. I didn't understand. Mrs. Walsh, the judge said sternly, you are 32 years old. Are you truly claiming you did not understand that borrowed money must be repaid? It wasn't supposed to be a real loan, Clarissa whispered desperately. It was family money. Judge Harris's expression hardened like stone. Mrs. Walsh, Judge Harris said evenly, is this your signature on the promissory note? Clarissa shifted in her seat, mascaraed lashes fluttering. Yes, Your Honor, but... Did anyone force you to sign it? No, but... Then it is a legally binding loan, regardless of family ties. The judge turned next to the assault charge. Mrs. Harris tipped the stand, steady and unwavering as she testified to what she had witnessed. Then the 2 police officers who had responded described the scene, the neighbors, the visible mark on my cheek. When Clarissa's attorney tried to argue it had merely been a heated family disagreement, Judge Harris cut her off with a glare sharp enough to slice glass. Counselor, assault is assault. The relationship between the parties is irrelevant. Finally, Harold presented the spending evidence, the jewelry receipts, the spa invoices, the non-existent boutique investment. He laid out the horrifying truth, more than $600,000 gone in under half a year, with not a single asset to show for it. Your Honor, Harold said firmly, this is not mismanagement. This is fraud. Ms. Clarissa Walsh deliberately squandered her husband's resources to fund an extramarital affair while ignoring her binding legal obligations to my client. When both sides rested, Judge Harris called for a recess. I excused myself to the restroom and splashed cold water on my face. The weight of what I'd heard, the full scope of Clarissa's deceit, still felt almost unbearable. When court reconvened, the air was thick with anticipation. Judge Harris wasted no time. Ms. Walsh, she began, in all my years on this bench, I have rarely seen a case so clear. You borrowed $35,000 from your husband's mother, agreed to terms, and then spent 3 years evading repayment. You liquidated the house. That secured that debt and squandered over $600,000 on personal luxuries and an affair. When challenged, you resorted to physical violence and then attempted to manipulate the legal process to escape accountability. Clarissa's tears began to flow, but the judge was unmoved. My ruling is for the plaintiff. Ms. Walsh, you are ordered to repay Mrs. Margaret Walsh $67,000, representing the loan, accumulated interest, damages, and fees, within 30 days. Failure to comply will result in wage garnishment and asset seizure. Clarissa sobbed harder, but the gavel of justice was not finished. Furthermore, given the extensive evidence of fraud and deliberate deception, I am forwarding this matter to the District Attorney's Office for review of potential criminal charges. This goes beyond a civil dispute. It veers into criminal fraud. Her attorney sprang to her feet. Your Honor, my client has no assets. She cannot possibly. Judge Harris's gaze froze her mid-sentence. Perhaps your client should have considered that before she drained over $600,000 on luxury spending. This court does not reward fraud with sympathy. The judgment was final. As we left the courtroom, Clarissa stood in the hallway, weeping theatrically as her attorney whispered frantic reassurances. When she saw me, her face hardened into venom. This isn't over, she spat. You think you've won, but you haven't. I stopped, looked her directly in the eyes. My voice was calm, steady, final. Yes, Clarissa. It is over. It ended the moment you struck me. 3 months later, Daniel called. His voice was steadier than I'd heard in years. Mom, I have news. Clarissa's friend, the one with the fake boutique, was arrested today. Turns out she's been running scams for years. Will that help you recover any money? I asked. Probably not. The money's gone. But it means Clarissa may be facing charges too if they prove she knew it was a fraud. And how are you, son? Better, he said after a pause. I found a new job. Pays less, but it's honest. And they knew about my financial disclosures when they hired me. I'm living in a small apartment now. Nothing fancy, but it's mine. For the first time in years, I wake up and I don't dread what disaster Clarissa has created. I know what I earn, I know what I owe, and I know what's mine. It feels freeing. And the debt? I asked gently. I've been making payments every month, just like I promised. It'll take years, but I'll repay every cent. Daniel, you don't. Yes, Mom. I do. It's not just money. It's about proving to you, and to myself, that I'm the man you raised me to be. When I hung up, I sat in the quiet dusk of my garden, thinking of how much had changed. I had recovered most of what I lost, but more importantly, I had regained my son. Clarissa, meanwhile, was facing investigations in multiple states. Richard Hawthorne's wife had filed for divorce. The fake boutique case had blossomed into a full-blown interstate fraud probe. Every participant in the deception was finally being dragged into the light. One evening, as I sat among my blooming roses, my phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. I know where you live. This isn't over. I stared at it a long moment before hitting block and deleting the message. Clarissa could threaten me all she wanted, from a courtroom, from a cell, from the shadows. I had cameras, I had the law, I had truth on my side. And I had peace. A year later, I sold my old house and moved to a retirement community in Arizona. The mountains framed my mornings, the pool and garden club filled my afternoons. My neighbors were kind, seasoned souls who valued quiet joys. I bought a small condo with a balcony where roses thrived in the desert air. Daniel visited often, flying in from Chicago, where he'd found stable work and loyal friends. We never spoke of Clarissa. That chapter was sealed. One evening, as I watered my roses, my neighbor called over the fence. Margaret, someone's at your door. A young woman. She looks upset. My heart stuttered. But when I rounded the corner, it wasn't Clarissa. It was a woman in her 20s with tired eyes and familiar features. Mrs. Walsh, she said softly. My name is Jennifer. I know this is unexpected, but I need to talk to you about Clarissa. I studied her face. How do you know her? She's my sister. And she's doing to other families what she did to yours. We sat together on my patio as Jennifer poured out her story. Clarissa had moved to Florida under a new name, charming another wealthy man, spinning the same sob story about being victimized by her husband's cruel family. She was engaged again, draining accounts, weaving lies. I've been trying to warn people, Jennifer said. But she's convincing. She makes everyone believe she's the victim. You're the only one who ever fought her and won. I need to know how. So I brewed us tea and told her everything. About hiring investigators, keeping records, refusing to bend. About holding to principle even when it meant facing family. The secret, I said finally, is realizing you can't save someone who doesn't want saving. You can only protect yourself and the people you love. Jennifer stayed for dinner. We talked until the stars burned bright over the Arizona desert. Later, after she left, I sat in the quiet with my roses. A year earlier, I'd thought my life was over. Instead, I had discovered strength I never knew I had. Some battles come to us uninvited, waged against people we once called family. But when they do, we only have two choices: surrender or stand. I chose to stand. And in doing so, I discovered that even at 64, I was stronger than I'd ever believed. The roses in my garden bloomed in full glory, thriving after their transplant. And I realized, so had I. Now, I'll leave you with a question, dear listener. What would you do if you were in my place? Have you ever faced betrayal this deep? Share your story below. I'd love to hear how far my words reach. And before you go, I've left 2 more stories on the screen. They're channel favorites, and they'll shock you. Thank you for staying with me until the very end.